Welcome to Relationship Equity, a podcast that explores how successful people cultivate meaningful connections with others in their personal and professional lives. Learn from the stories, insights, and advice of leaders, innovators, and influencers who have built strong bonds with their teams, their customers, their communities, and their families. Here's Richard Walker.
I'm back with Graham Allcott, a speaker, podcaster, and author of the new book, Kind: The Quiet Power of Kindness at Work. We've been talking about the often overlooked role of kindness as a strategic advantage in business. Graham, numerous studies in psychology and neuroscience have explored the impacts of kindness on productivity. Can you elaborate on how this philosophy influences workplace performance?
Yeah, so I mentioned before that kindness is a win-win-win-win. So a single kind act, you will have the receiver of that kindness. It will release feel-good chemicals in their brain. They'll feel better. They'll have a better mental health just by being on the receiving end of kindness, knowing that there's an abundant world out there that's helping them. The giver of an act of kindness, it will also release oxytocin and dopamine in them, and they'll start to feel good about doing that. Then you have the witnesses. So there was this study that looked at, so the idea was, are you going to be inspired to do something kind by seeing someone else do a kind act? And they called it the Mother Teresa effect, because what they did is they showed these people a video of Mother Teresa doing kind things for half an hour, and they measured the levels of what's called salivary immunoglobulin, which is a sort of chemical that you get in the mouth, secretion in your mouth. And basically that chemical is the one that is the first barrier against all the harmful pathogens that we get in food. So if you have more of that chemical, you have a higher level of well-being, you have a better immune system, you are just healthier. And what they found was that it went up quite significantly straight away, and then that effect continued over the next couple of days. And so, just witnessing acts of kindness around you will actually give you physical health benefits as well as the psychological benefits. The fourth beneficiary is you've got the fact that once people are witnessing it, once people are inspired because they've received an act of kindness, then other ripple effect acts of kindness happen. So you've got the giver, you've got the receiver, you've got the witness, and then you've got these ripple effects beneficiaries. There's a lovely study in the States that looked at, there was a guy walked into a kidney donation bank and just say, hey, I've got two healthy kidneys. I want to donate one. And they're like, is it to your brother? Is it to your neighbor? And he's like, no, it's to whoever you want it to be for. Like, I just need to do this incredibly kind thing. And they tracked this study tracked this one kidney donation. Obviously, just one of the most selfless, remarkable acts of kindness that you could possibly ever embark upon. And what they found, there were 29 other kidney donations that they could directly link to that one. So, what happens is that person gives his kidney to, let's say it's to a young guy whose kidney's failing, and a member of his family goes, oh, that's amazing, I'm going to now go and donate a kidney. And they track that one. And then when he donates the kidney, something else. And so they tracked that you've got these 29 that they could find knock-on effects, beneficiaries from it. So I think when we decide we're too busy to do something kind, I think we should bear that in mind, that we're leaving, even when it's a small act of kindness, we're leaving an awful lot on the table because we're denying ourselves those psychological benefits. We're denying the witnesses, we're denying the person on the receiving end of it, and we're also denying all of those potential ripple effect beneficiaries that might be further down the line. So, I like to think about that when you have those moments in your day where you notice that gap, and there's like the opportunity arises. Often, especially at work, the opportunity to be kind presents itself and it's there for like 5 seconds, right? You think about if you're in a meeting and there's a little moment in a meeting where you could say something kind about a colleague, and then within 5 seconds, the chair has moved the agenda onto something else. And it's like, oh, I missed it, right? So often we've really got to think about that gap that opens up as being this really temporary little window. And when you see the opportunity to be kind, don't hesitate, like just jump into it.
Yeah, I would challenge what you said a little bit there, that I don't think you've missed the opportunity altogether. I mean, it's obviously much more impactful in the moment, but because I think some people although they want to say something, for whatever reason, something stops them. Whatever reason, probably 10 different reasons you can give me right now, but it's not
Yeah.
too late. It's not too late. You can still, after the fact, either one-on-one with that person, or talk to that person's boss, or send an email, or do something. It's never too late, I guess, is my point.
Oh, of course. But then you think about, let's say you're on the bus or the tube or a train or whatever, and like all the seats are taken,
Right,
and
right,
then
right,
someone
right.
gets on, right?
Yes, that is too
If
late if you
you
don't.
if you move straight away and you
Right.
say, "Hey, take my seat,"
Yes.
but if you leave it like, what's the line here? 10, 11 seconds or something, and like,
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
British, we have this
yeah,
uh,
right.
and in fact that's an interesting one, is that the biggest barrier to kindness, there was a big study on this.
Yeah, let's
They
talk
found
about
the
that.
biggest barrier to kindness was the idea or the fear that your kindness might be misinterpreted.
Right.
And with Brits, that's even higher than everybody else because we
Yeah,
have this kind of social awkwardness. So with Brits, it was
yeah.
with everybody else in the world, the average was 69%. And if you take the Brits just on their own, it was like 74.
There's a
So
cultural thing,
Brits
interesting.
are even more worried about their kindness being
Yeah.
misinterpreted.
Well,
But
fortunately, Graham, I've
on-
lived in America for 35 years, so
right, yeah.
so
So that maybe changes it. But yeah, I
yeah,
think when you're on a train or you're on a bus or whatever, and you have that moment, if you leave it 10 seconds,
right,
what
it's too late.
happens, right, is it
Yeah,
suddenly becomes even more awkward, and
yeah,
and the
right.
fear of it being misinterpreted goes up.
Yeah,
And so, and it's like the same if you're in a meeting. Yeah, you can go and have that
yeah,
conversation
right,
offline,
right. Yeah.
but you probably
Doesn't have the
miss the
same
power
impact.
that like
Yeah,
everybody else witnesses it
yeah.
in that moment. So I do think often you need to see like the gap as this thing that sort of presents itself, and almost like an
Yeah,
elevator, it arrives and then it leaves, and it's like you've
right.
just got that time to
And
jump
the key is
on.
recognize
Yeah.
it. Recognize it
Yes.
in the moment to
Yeah,
act
exactly.
immediately. Speaking of timing and not being too late, I have to say something you mentioned earlier about the kidney fella. I remember the first time I went through a drive-through to get a cup of coffee at a Starbucks or whichever one it was, and my coffee had already been paid for with the car in front of me. Which I remember the first time it happening, probably I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, and since then, I probably paid it on 1,000 times. Now I almost feel bad now that I haven't given a kidney away, but I don't think nobody would want my body parts anyway, Graham. So but that's a simple random act of kindness. It's not in the workplace, but I think it's a way of living, whether it's in the workplace or at home. And the key is you're not doing it to get recognition. See, that's the tricky part of it as well. I love what you said about the company that has a meeting for people to talk about what they've done, but hopefully people are kind because it's just the right thing to be. It's the right thing to do, and you're not looking for recognition from somebody else. You're doing it because it's the right thing to do, and hopefully, the result of that for you is you feel better about yourself as a result of being that way. And I, like you, I believe that if people aren't, if they aren't used to operating and thinking that way, I think that can be learned. And I think once you kind of get, if you start getting those endorphin rushes or whatever you want to call it as a result of being kind, you want to do more of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I often say, one of the questions that I often get around this topic is the idea of what if you're being kind and then someone's taking advantage of you, right? And I think I think there's a bigger picture here, and the bigger picture is, which I talk about in the book, is the idea that we get to choose whether we live in an abundance mentality or a scarcity mentality, right?
Yeah,
And the thing
100%.
about having a culture of kindness around you, and those kind of kind acts being the kind of society that we want to live in. The example I quite often give around this is often on the London Underground, you'll get on and you'll be sat down, and then someone who is homeless will come up the carriage and they'll give like a begging speech, and they'll basically say, "Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, I'm trying to get money for a hostel. Like if you can just help me out, if you've got a couple of pounds." It's much more difficult now because obviously a lot of people don't carry cash anymore. I never carry cash. So it's actually much harder to help in that moment. But sometimes the question comes up, and people debate this on radio phone-ins and in newspaper opinion pieces and all the rest of it, which is like, are these people just going to use the money on drugs, or are these people some kind of like con artists who they're not really homeless, but they're just tricking us into thinking that they are or whatever? And my attitude to that is, if I give 10 times, and let's say out of those 10 times, 8 of those times, it was a genuine person in need, and I've given that. Do I care that those 2 people, when we're kind of having one over me and whatever? Because what's the alternative? So if I have the mentality that we live in abundance, that there is enough for everybody, and it's my job to just give a little bit to help somebody who doesn't have, enough right now. There is enough for all of us, and we can think like that. But if I choose the opposite of that, if I choose to be suspicious of everybody, if I choose to give to none of those 10 people,
Right.
I've taken money away from those 8 people that needed it. But B, what I've chosen and what I voted for in my action there is a mentality of scarcity, a mentality where we should all be suspicious of each other, and a mentality where we're not going to help each other. And there might be a time where I or someone I know is in need in one way or another. And so when that situation comes around, which world do I want to be living in then? And so I always just think of it as, you just have to think about, like, we all have in our brains the ability to shape a reality that's based on abundance. And we all also have the ability to shape a reality that's based on scarcity. And like, which do you want?
I'm going to
So
tell you a little story.
I just keep it really simple.
I completely agree. I got to tell you a little story, and typically I don't tell these kind of stories because I don't want it to come across the wrong way. I'm going to tell it because based on what you told me, it's
This is what happens, by the way, is kindness. Talking about kindness becomes a Trojan horse to get into deep and meaningful stuff.
yeah,
So
I completely
I'm
agree.
glad we got there.
I have a witness. I have to witness to verify this story because it's going to sound like I made it up based on what you've just said. So I met with this last summer back in Minnesota. I met with a friend of mine for a beer. And as I turn the corner, right in the corner, there's always somebody there that's got to sign up. And sometimes I've got a couple of kids with them. And like you, I don't often carry cash, but if I got any cash, I always give them some cash. Now, all I had was a $50 bill because I just played golf. I just won some money playing golf, and I gave it to them. No big deal. So I literally around the corner, the bar that I was meeting with this fella, I get out of my truck. Now, like you, I was taught, you pick up the rubbish. If there's rubbish on the floor, you pick it up, you throw it in the damn bin. In fact, it's one of our core values in my company culture written on a wall. C, character. Pick up the rubbish. See a piece of rubbish, you pick it up and you throw it in the bin. So as I got out of my truck, I looked down, there's a piece of rubbish on the floor. It wasn't rubbish, it was a $100 bill. $100. It sounds made up. And I went into the bar and I was holding this $100 and I told my buddy Scott, I said, "You're not going to believe what just happened. I just gave 50 away and I doubled it when I got out of my truck." Now that $100 was burning in my pocket. I did not want it. Later that evening, we had dinner with my wife's sister and their 2 young adult kids. And one was in college and he's doing a fundraising event of some kind. I can't remember what it was for. I was doing a marathon. And that money that was burning in my pocket, it was so easy to get rid of it. I gave it straight to him. But, I don't know, call that serendipitous, call it coincidence, call it whatever you want. But if you have that mindset, only good things can happen. Now, I understand the argument that you shouldn't do it because someone's going to go buy booze with it. Well, that's their call. If they want to do that, then that's up to them. But for the 9 others that use it wisely, it's worth the 1 person out of 10 that uses it inappropriately.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's, for me, worth the risk that someone is in that moment pulling the wool over your eyes. I don't know if that phrase translates in the States, but yeah, someone's being less than on it.
It does for me, Graham, because I'm from Yorkshire. So
But I think we can choose to see the inherent good in people. And yes, of course, and that's not about being naive. I think it's always good to give people the benefit of the doubt, and then you have boundaries. And so you have boundaries if people are constantly doing things to sort of take advantage of your kindness.
Yeah.
And that's an important part to it as well, by the way, is the difference between being kind and being nice. And I basically say that the difference between kind and nice is truth. So niceness is just continually acting as if you're giving someone the benefit of the doubt, and it's really not committed to truth. So often in a sort of leadership context, nice is about telling people what they want to hear, and then kind is about telling people what they need to hear. And so I think there's a huge difference between nice and kind. And if we're truly kind, we get to also hold people accountable, to have boundaries, to bring truth into the space, so that we can actually use that to make sure that everybody's making good decisions. And that for me is a really important part of it as well, is having those boundaries and having that commitment to truth.
I believe that you're being kind to somebody, telling them what they need to know rather than what they want to hear. That's an act of kindness in itself, because then, if they're not self-aware enough to know that they need to course correct or do something differently, then you're helping them understand that. Okay, one last thing, I could talk with you all day. One last question I've got for you. So for people that are listening now that are maybe thinking to themselves, well, maybe I'm not, I feel like I'm a kind person, but maybe I'm not, really performing in as kind of way as I'd like to. What should people do? What should they start doing differently than they've done for the rest of their lives in order to, to then be able to wear their own badge of honor, saying, I am not only a kind person, but I'm doing kind acts? How should they how should they live their lives differently, especially in the workplace?
Okay, so there's 8 principles in the book.
Right.
And the 8 principles are really all about how to develop this practice of kindness and kindfulness. But let me give you 2. I think these are really actionable things that people can take away. So the first is, and coming back to our choice about abundance or scarcity, kindness starts with you. So when we think about kindness, often the first thing we think of is, how can I pay it forward on a parking meter, or who should I be kind to? Like we start immediately with thinking outside, and kindness starts by thinking inside. So prioritizing self-kindness. When we're kind to ourselves, we've chosen abundance over scarcity. And that means we're in the practice of abundance versus scarcity, and we're in abundance more often during the day. So if we're kinder to ourselves, that's actually a really generous thing to do for everybody else, because it role models it. It role models abundance to yourself. And then the second thing, when I talk to people about kindness, and when I'm doing the Kindful Leadership program, where we set them these challenges around kindness, usually on week 2 or 3, the little light bulb goes off for people, which is, if you really want to focus on kindness with other people, it's about being present. And if you want to be more present, you've got to slow the hell down.
Right.
There's a big piece in there. One of the principles is just called slow down. And it's all about how to just put your life into a mode which is not always necessarily about speed, but is about savoring. So not jumping from one thing to the next, one call to the next, one email to the next, or whatever, but actually just being more in the moment in everything that you do. So much of what we do, particularly around thinking about work and productivity, is all based in the past or the future, right? So we're regretting something that went wrong, or we're doing an inquest into this, or we're worried about this thing in the future, or we're procrastinating because we're sort of coming up with some story about what might happen if we do this wrong. And so we're never in the present moment. And so the more we can just get present, especially when you're around other people, the easier it is to tap into some of those things we talked about, the empathy and the trust and the psychological safety. And from there, you start to see, you just notice more of those gaps and just spot more of those opportunities to be kind.
I love the work that you've done. I love the work that you're doing. Thank you very much for being with us today. And hopefully we'll get to catch up in the near future.
Yeah, and it's worth saying that Kind, The Quiet Power of Kindness at Work, is in all good bookshops and the bad one. And you can find out, if you want to just connect with me, I do this weekly email every Sunday. And the idea is, it's one positive or productive idea for the week ahead, and it's free. And if you just go to grahamallcott.com, you can sign up on the little thing.
Brilliant. grahamallcott.com it is. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Cheers.
This has been Relationship Equity, If you want to take your career, your business, or your personal relationships to the next level, reach out to Richard at yorksolutions.net. You can also get Richard's book, Relationship Equity, your cornerstone investment to great gains in business and life, on Amazon now. Relationship Equity with Richard Walker is a production of Forbes Books.